Continuing in Chapter 3 in Basic Tools book, we are now on page 3-29 where we're going to begin the exercise on the extrude, boss, and cut. And if we just take a look at this page for a moment, you can see that this part is shown here in a front view with a broken out section, top view. This is referred to as an auxiliary view, projecting this plane up, and we have our isometric view here. All three views here are necessary to give us all the details of this particular part. We're going to move forward and get started with this, and most of the drawing is done by creating this view right here, this sketch. Notice the location of the origin. We'll refer to that once we get started in the drawing. And this part is drawn in inches. So I'm going to go ahead and get started by creating a new part within SolidWorks. And it's going to be a part. Remind everyone it's always best to check your units. We're in inches, pounds, and seconds. And I'm going to go in here one step further and go to edit the units to make sure that we're calling out to 3 decimal places because some of the dimensions are shown in the book to 3 decimal places. Okay, we're asked to start by sketching on the front plane. I'm going to turn all 3 planes on for a moment first, just so you can see them. And you now have all 3 planes visible. Exit that sketch. I didn't put anything on it. It's going to go away. So there's a number of ways to select the front plane to make a sketch. I can select it first and then go to sketch, or I can select it here and go to sketch. There's a number of ways to tell SolidWorks that this is the surface we want to draw on. I'm going to go ahead and start a sketch. You'll see that that shows up right here. And here's my origin. We're going to begin by drawing the feature shown on 3-30. So I'm going to start with my line tool and just try to recreate this shape as a rough. Now the proportions don't need to be perfect yet, because the next step we're going to do is go add some geometrical constraints and some dimensional constraints. I purposely drew these not parallel just to make sure that the option was available for me to add that geometric constraint. So we could go to just add relation, or if you just hold the control button down and select these 2 lines, make sure that they are the only 2 lines that are highlighted at the moment and they turn light blue. I have the option now, if I click here, to make those lines parallel. Okay, I just mentioned that make sure you only have those 2 lines selected, and I didn't notice that my front plane is currently light blue also, and it's showing up here, and this is why I got this error message. So all I need to do right now is delete that one option, and now I go back to having just my 2 lines selected, and now I hit parallel and I shouldn't get an ugly message, and now that looks good. So SolidWorks is now happy. Again, just making sure that you don't have more items selected. You can look in this little dialog box right here. So we've got those selected. Again, I like to keep my sketch perpendicular when I'm drawing. I'm now going to go in and add all of these dimensions. So I'm going to grab my Smart Dimension tool. It's generally a good idea to add the overall dimensions first, the large dimensions. So I'm going to add my overall height, and then I'm going to add my overall width. Don't panic too much if your part starts to look a little stretched out to start. It'll all add up once we add the final dimensions in. So now I can go in and start adding these other dimensions. So this guy here is 1. Now I remind you that there's a couple of ways to add that dimension. I could add it by selecting the single line. Whoops, go back to my dimension tool And if I select a line, I can add the dimension this way. Or I can reference the 2 points. Now this got a little confusing. This line got very short. So I'm going to add a dimension from here to here. And it would have been smart of me to add this dimension first, 1.75. Pull that guy out. All right, and we need to add this dimension. Again, I can dimension to a point to a line. That one's 2. Starting to shape up. 1.5 for this guy. And 3 for, oops, I put that dimension to the wrong location. That one's supposed to be 3. And there's supposed to be another line in here. I missed a feature. So I need to add a feature to that. So right now those two things are connected. See if I can get out of my smart dimension. I'm going to display relations. Oops. Get out of that. All right. So I think the easiest thing to do would be to delete that line and redraw it. So that's what I'm going to do. Come in here, draw a line over, and then draw my line down. Now, of course, I'm going to need to go back and hold the control button and make these two parallel again. Here we go. So this dimension was actually supposed to go to here. And this dimension is supposed to be 3. So let's go ahead and fix that. If I click on this, it'll allow me to change that to 3. And then I can come back in and add a dimension to here. Okay. These two are parallel. Now we just need to add, I think all that's left is our angle dimension, which should finish defining our sketch. When you add an angle dimension, you're going to pull the 2 lines that you're referenced to. If I refer to the book just for a second, notice that this 45, if I carry this extension line down, it's referencing this line, and this extension line is referencing this line. So that tells me that these are the 2 lines that I need to select in order to get the correct dimension. So grab Smart Dimension tool, select this line and this line. Now, as I move my cursor, or move my mouse around, it gives me 3 different, or actually 4 different options of where I want to put this dimension. The one that matches the one in the book is this guy over here. And I'm going to type in 45 degrees. Notice that everything turns black and I get the message in the bottom here that's telling me it's a fully defined sketch, which is good. So I can now exit the sketch, and referring to the instructions in the book, as we go to extrude this feature, or make a feature by extruding the sketch, we're going to select the option that is the mid-plane option. And you're going to see what that does is it pushes the part out in both directions from the front plane, which is important when we get to some other features in this part. If you miss selecting the mid plane, you're going to not be able to use the origin and have everything work the way you want it to. So that's 3 inches we're looking for here. And now we've got our extruded part. I'm going to undo that for a second because I did that kind of quickly, and I want you to notice that right now my sketch is not selected. If I try to go to Extruded Boss, SolidWorks doesn't know what I want to extrude. I can select it by going here, or a better way to select it would be to click on this and reference the sketch here. Notice that it's now highlighted light blue, and I can do my extrusion. The default is blind, so I'm going to switch it back to mid-plane, and I've got my part. All right. I'm happy with what I've done so far, so this is a good time to hit save. I'm going to go to save. Like all the other exercises, I'm going to save them last name, first initial, what chapter it is, and this happens to be exercise 1. I don't want to hit save right now because I'm going to save over that previous part that I drew, so I need to add a little more to this. I'm just going to put EX1 for exercise 1. And I have my name, what chapter it is. I'm good to go. Alright, now we can add the next feature, so I'm going to move forward in the book to the next page, and the next feature we're going to add is a cut feature, and we're going to do that by adding a couple of holes, and we're going to add some geometric constraints that make those holes symmetric. Alright, so I'll show you how to follow along with those steps. Okay, so the book is referring to Control 8 to make yourself look normal to a plane. I can select the plane, I can go normal to, or I can hit Control 8 and it's the same thing. It's going to bring me normal to that plane. While I have that plane selected, it says open a new sketch and draw a center line. I could say go to new sketch. Actually, I will do that because that's what the book is calling for. So because that's selected, SOLIDWORKS knows that that's the flat surface that I want to put my sketch on. So it's now associated with that plane. It says to sketch a center line from the origin. Well, in order to make a center line, we need to pull down from our line tool and select the center line option. And then when we click on the origin, we'll get the coincident symbol, and it tells us that it's snapping to the origin. And I'm going to click and draw a center line all the way down. Pulled it a little longer than necessary, but that's okay, so I can see it. It's just a construction line. All right. And then we're going to add 2 circles, one on either side of the center line, and we're going to create some relationships and add the dimensions. So I'm going to grab my circle tool, and I'm just going to roughly click over here and over here. And I'm going to hold the control button down and select, whoops, let me get out of the circle command first. Now hold control, I'm going to select the other circle, and I want them to be equal, so that way I only have to dimension one of them. And I'm going to select the center line. These are already selected, they're still blue. If I hold the control button down and now select the center line, notice I have the line and both circles selected. I can hit symmetric and it's going to put them opposite each other around the line. What that does is allows me to set dimensions up in a way that makes sense for this particular part. What's important is the distance between these 2 holes. So I've grabbed my smart dimension, that the distance between them is 1.5 inches, and that they are centered about the part. Now I could do the math and figure out how far it is from here to here, but this forces them to be centered, so if I were to change my extrusion, they would remain centered. I need to add the size dimension, which I haven't put in yet, which is 1/2 inch, 0.5, and then I need to tell it how far it is up off of an edge here, and that dimension is, put my glasses on, 0.707. Alright, I again get my black lines and some text that tells me that this sketch is fully defined. I can exit the sketch. It is highlighted. I'm going to go to features. We're not going to extruded boss because we want to put holes in this. Instead, we're going to extruded cut. I'm going to rotate it so you can see what's going on here, and I'm just going to say go through all and hit OK, and we should end up with a couple of holes in here. Alright, looking good so far. So next we need to add the additional cut features. We cut the holes out, but now we're going to add these. What I like about this author is he's going to teach you some neat tricks on how to use, remind you about making things symmetric, and we're going to use those geometric constraints. So we're going to create, in this case, instead of telling you to select the sketch command, he said create an extruded cut using the through all, and I don't believe in the previous page, maybe double check that. Yeah, he doesn't tell you to make a sketch on there to begin with. So we can go straight to extruded cut and select this surface, and when we do that, SolidWorks will automatically throw a sketch on there. Now I'm going to look normal to that because I want to look at it this way, and I'm going to go ahead and begin making that rectangle. So actually I'm going to make my center line first. Again, I can use the origin to snap to and make my center line. Come back up and grab my rectangle tool. I want it to be coincident with this edge, so I'm going to highlight that edge and drag my rectangle down and hit OK. Now if I hit escape, my rectangle turns dark blue. I hold the control button again. This is just like we did with the circles. Select this line and then select my center line and again make it symmetric. Whatever dimension I now add in here, it's going to stay centered about the part. So let's go ahead and add those two dimensions in. We want a dimension here of 0.25, and we want a dimension here of 1.25. And again, we get the fully defined sketch. It's all black. What's neat now is when we exit the sketch, because we selected the extruded cut or cut extrude option to begin with, as soon as I hit exit sketch, it knows that I want to cut this. So we kind of saved a step by doing that. It automatically launches us into this. Now we want to cut up to a particular face. So we're going to select this face, or we could, I guess it says select cut to a vertex. We could select that option as well. So let's see what, if we pick this option and hit this point, notice it only cuts that deep. So I select my vertex for my extrude and bingo, I've got my extruded cut.